You looking for trouble? Well, you come to the right place. You looking for trouble? Take a look at my face. I was born standing up and talking back. My father was a green-eyed man. Yeah, 'cause I'm evil. Ooh, yes, I'm evil. These glasses don't fit me. Anyways, holy Moses. Okay, so this is gonna be a combination of two different topics. I'm going to talk about the next in my RC adventures. My flipping with research chemicals. Yesterday, since it was my first day of school, I decided, hey, screw it. Fucking, I did it, went well, let's celebrate. So I smoked a fuck ton of DMT yesterday. And this, for me, I don't think cross-tolerance is the right word, but it proves to me that there is some, at least for me, but my metabolism's weird, mind you. There's for me at least some sort of overlap in the various DMTs, like they affect the potentiation of one another. I imagine the same would be true with 4-ACO DMT, but I've managed to smoke DMT on mushrooms, and which is, psilocin is 4-HO DMT. Smoked DMT on 4-ACO DMT and then didn't get anywhere near as much out of it. Was never able to break through, but yeah. So last night I decided to try mixing 130 milligrams of the purest MDMA I've ever done. Like, I took it to a spectrometer place and it legitimately says nothing but MDMA in it. And so 130 is plenty. And I did a parachute because I anticipated that 4-ACO DMT would last about the same amount of time as the MDMA, of about 22 to 25 milligrams. Now, it started. I thought this was a dud. Like, I waited about an hour and a half and I wasn't tripping, so I was like, what the fuck? This is fucking lame. Like is my batch somehow tainted, or is my serotonin drained from all the DMT I smoked today? So I kind of was like, okay, well, I'll try sniffing some, and which is my usual ROA when it comes to 4-ACO DMT. Yeah, so I sniffed probably about 15 milligrams in addition, and then I stepped out the door and the parachute hit me as I was going to get some food, and holy Moses, was I tripping fucking balls, dude. Like, I saw a big mud crab looking thing descend from the sky and like reach out to me, and like it was floating above me, and I was watching what looked like people forming inside of it, and like just patterns everywhere. Very, very like it was more, this harkens back to my video of, will the real DMT please stand up. It was very, like, it felt more like a DMT experience than the DMT experiences I had that day, which, I only successfully broke through twice despite doing it several times, and even those breakthroughs were somewhat disappointing. Like I was getting the whole flowing back and forth, and ooh, cool, this is DMT, but I was looking for interactions with entities, but all I got was just this one entity goes, "Your mission in life is," and I'm like, "What?" And that was it. But yeah, this was a really, really glorious flip. It was nowhere near as like sedating and knock you on your ass as like the mushrooms. I mean, it was more visual, I found, but like when I did those 2Gs of Cubenzis and chocolate, and flipped, like I was just so lethargic that I could barely get up. And mushrooms, they make me feel kind of drunk, and like during that particular flip, I was walking around speaking like a preacher, like, "Oh, this is grace, this is a divine gift." But I like watching specifically weird horror movies when I'm tripping. You call me fucking crazy, but I do. Because for one, I like collecting other print stuff, particularly Giallo horror. I got a couple Dario Argento films, and I ended up selecting Berberian Sound Studio, which, let me tell you, this movie is probably not for everyone, especially people who haven't seen Giallo horror, and which is, for those of you who don't know, it's that very schlocky, exploitative Italian horror style that was very psychedelic. Dario Argento, as I said, so it was kind of the main guy. So Suspiria, bird with the crystal plumage, Tenebrae, so on and so forth. A lot of these, not Phantasm, not Phantasmagoria. I don't know. He did one which is like that, which personally was one of my favorites. Like so much I can't even remember them. But Berberian Sound Studio, for one, it had Toby Jones in it, who, fun fact, I met. I met him when I was doing a film program called Intersections, and he was taking a picture of the building that my program was in while he was working on a film. Me and one of the other guys were out having a smoke, and we saw him, and he was asking us questions about the building, and I was like, "Hey dude, I really loved you in The Mist," and I was just surprised by his British accent, because you never really hear that much in his characters. He's usually portraying American characters. But Berberian Sound Studio, I think, was definitely the best performance I've seen from him. And the film, a lot of it was carried by him because it centers around him. And as like it's very psychedelic, and I don't know, my interpretation of it is that it's where art and life kind of blend together. And this guy Toby Jones, whose character's name is Gilroy, by the way, he's a very meek, sort of shy, conservative, unassertive person, and he goes to this culture where all of these guys are chasing skirts and they're yelling at each other, and he can't speak Italian, but as the film goes on, his character becomes more and more kind of corrupted by what's going on around him, and it's got this great opening title sequence for the movie within the movie that they're making, the Equestrian Vortex, which is, there's this very dark humor in it, because he thinks he's working on a movie about horses, but it turns out to be this horror movie. But the director will refuse to call it a horror movie. No, it's a Santini movie. And it's it's kind of like it becomes this like purgatory for him, and it seems like he's arrived at this place for judgment, because it turns out that his plane ride that got him there in the first place never existed, he started his day-to-day life in the world that he thought he knew before starts to blend into the cinema, or blend into the narrative. There's a scene where he wakes up in his bed at home and there's this doorbell ringing and he can't figure out what's going on, and he's going, "Oh, who are you? I'll call the police." And then he walks out, and when he opens his door, he's back in the studio and he's watching a film of him doing what he just did like a few seconds ago. And things grow increasingly like psychologically scattered, and he's eventually speaking Italian with the director, and I think they actually dubbed his lines in, but it's kind of him embracing like these untapped sort of desires within him, these desires to be bigger than he is, to be something other than this meek, shy little guy. And there's some really eerie scenes in it, like he's writing letters to his mother the whole time, and there's one part where an actress comes in and says, "Can I read my lines to you, or practice my lines to you?" And he says, "Oh, sure." And she just reads off his letter in Italian, and he's just like, "Yeah, that was all right," and leaves. And he becomes more and more engrossed in the film itself, and it's also an interesting sort of study of how they would dub and Foley those types of films. You never actually see, except for the opening title sequence, what's going on in the film itself, but you are told what's going on. There's a scene where these witches are getting their hair pulled out by priests, and he's ripping radishes, like he's ripping the stems off of radishes, and there's the projectors rolling as these guys with hatchets and sledgehammers are smashing up watermelons, and so it which is something I love, because it is leaving what visual imagery is transpiring up to the viewer to decide. And those are the kinds of movies that I like, whereas the only limitation is your imagination. And I could see how this movie would be very confusing for some people because of its very non-linear narrative, and how it keeps, one incident after another, has them going back to the drawing board again and again and again and again, like they're never going to finish this project. But he becomes more corrupted as it goes on, like I say. And at first I was like, it's probably just because I was pissy, because I thought the 4-HTO-DMT wasn't kicking in. I thought it was I just wasted a bunch of time and serotonin, and listening to all this screaming in the first hour of the movie. But yeah, like it's kind of jarring, you know. There's this, but the you know the film lives up to its title, Berberian Sound Studio, because the sound effects for the film itself are so bloody good. And they had I think covers of the infamous Giallo band, well, I don't think they were a Giallo film band to begin with, but they gained their notoriety through their work with Dario Argento and some other filmmakers, but Goblin, and they make some of the eeriest scores. Like, look up the score for Suspiria, the original one. I like the new Suspiria, I like Tom York's score, but it's very different, and it's not quite as eerie as what Goblin did for the original Suspiria. But I also like how it also addressed a lot of what was going on behind the scenes that was more sort of taboo in Giallo horror, which was, you know, these directors sort of taking advantage sexually of the actresses and just being rude assholes to each other. And I mean, it just could not have been a better movie to watch while tripping that hard. Yeah, so I think though that yeah, to going back to the trip itself, like, I think like, cause you know, with 4ACO DMT I typically expect about a 4-hour trip. It ended up going on for about 8 to 10 hours, so I didn't fall asleep till 2 in the morning, despite, you know, eventually being like fucking just popping a bunch of benzos to try and get myself to sleep, and even that like barely slowed it down. So like and I also did a bunch of K towards the end, which put me in a very crazy tryptamine realm as I was listening to this beautiful sort of prog rock, and it was magical, but I mean, it seemed to extend the trip a lot longer and make it a lot more intense, to the point where like I was just lapsing in and out of my body for hours and hours and hours. But in the places I was going, it was cool as creating worlds with these tryptamine DMT-esque beings, and I mean, it's a flip that I definitely want to do again, because I mean, 4ACO DMT, in my opinion, has very little headspace in terms of just you know, the mental weight that comes with psychedelics. I find that I don't feel the same just the load on my brain that I would have felt if I had taken mushrooms or something like that instead, especially for that, like the amount of visuals I was having. Like, I was looking up at the sky and like fucking just huge creatures, and like I saw the Starlinks satellites going by, but it was like I could barely focus on them because of how fucking intense these visuals were. And they were also super interactive visuals. Like I would reach my hand out and it would come down to me and like, you know, grasp my hand, and like I remember looking in the mirror and having some of the craziest like facial distortions, like to the point where I had 4 eyes going across my head, and like you know, which was, you know, very shroom-like. People refer to 4ACO DMT as synthetic shrooms. I can kind of like, I never quite agreed with that comparison, but that's the closest shroom-esque visual I've seen, because substantial doses of shrooms, I find, like I'll see eyes growing out of people's foreheads and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, it was definitely a very enjoyable flip. It was a very strong one, and it was a real surprise because, as I said, I thought it was a dud. I thought it fizzled. I thought, because usually, when I parachute this stuff, it kicks in about 20 minutes, and I'm fucking fully high within 40. And as I said, it took about an hour and a half, and then, I ended up upping the dose pretty much by at least double the amount, because when you're sniffing at it, that ROA has a much higher bioavailability, and so 15 milligrams would be kind of like 30 milligrams oral. So I was like it was a pretty heavy dose, like to the point of being like almost like a heroic dose. But I was still able to go on a bike ride and go and get some food and explore the environment. I mean, it was a beautiful night last night. I got to check out the industrial shit. I wanted to take some pictures of the moon over all the industrial stuff, but since I was on a Lime bike, which I had rented, it wouldn't let me access my camera, which was kind of a pity, but oh well, what can you do? Yeah, it's definitely one I'd recommend. I mean, in hindsight, I think because I've noticed this overlap between DMT and 4-ACO. DMT, I should have done 4-HOMIT instead, especially because it's like a little less intensive, I find, anyways. Like yeah, it can be like extremely visual, but in a much less realistic and more cartoony sort of sense, and with even less headspace, I find, anyways. And also, there wouldn't, at least in my experience, I haven't had an overlap between the effects of 4-HOMIT and DMT itself. I've looked up cross tolerance between 4-ACO DMT and DMT, and most people talk about how they smoke DMT on 4-ACO DMT all the time and have a blast. But for me, I've just never been able to break through as a result of that, and I think because I had just dumped my serotonin so much that afternoon, a couple hours before I dropped the 4-ACO MDMA parachute, that it caused this kind of delayed fuse. But I mean, I still got the full experience, but like, goddamn, like I'm still getting like slight visuals today. Like, that's how strong it was. Like, I could tell if I smoked a joint right now, it would bring it back like fucking full force. Like, it was like one of those types of trips. It was very strong, but it was a good one. It was definitely a very, very good combination, and like, intense would be a good word to describe it, I would say. But at the same time, again, more clear-headed. I did kind of get that drunk, shroomy feeling every now and then. Like, a couple times I said to myself, I feel kind of drunk right now. Like, I could tell it was much more manageable than, say, if I had taken like the equivalent of like 4 grams of like penis envy or something, because again, this was a high dose, and verging on heroic dose. Like definitely like the visuals that I had, like, again, when I did the 2 grams of teachers and chocolate with MDMA, like, those were pretty intense. But like, these were even more intense, but like, it for some reason didn't feel as like just completely like I didn't feel completely ensnared by it. I felt like I was still, in my mind, still or more able to clearly navigate than something with, you know, psilocybin mushrooms, LSD, something like that. For the next go, I think I will try for Hamet and mdma. I would have done a live video last night, but my phone was on, it had very low battery, so I only really had enough time to you know, to get this Lime bike and go down to get some food, and yeah, but it was really something. God damn. I mean, like, I didn't have any entity type interactions, but I remember like world building with them, like actually creating landscapes and stuff, especially after I did the ketamine, towards like when I knew I was kind of peaking, and like my pupils don't really get dilated very often from hallucinogens, which is, I don't know if that's a good sign or a bad sign, but like my pupils were more dilated than I think I've ever seen them. Like just big ass fucking saucers, and I knew that like it was obvious how high I was, because when I went into the Wendy's, I'm pretty sure the guy, like, he was checking my bill to make sure it wasn't counterfeit, because he probably thought I was on meth or something. But yeah, overall it was a very good time, and I would do it again, but next time I think I would just stick to the route of just sniffing it, because that way I find it kicks in 15 minutes. You need a lot less. It lasts substantially like a shorter duration, and since, you know, I just buy it legally from a lab for relatively cheap and have a lot of it, you know, that's not the problem. You know, I don't have to worry about being super cost effective with it. But yeah, no, that was a pretty damn good flip, and I gotta say, that's definitely that's up there with, I mean, I really have a hard time saying what my favorite one is, because they're all good in different regards, especially, you know, in different situations. Like, I would say that the 4-ACO DMT is definitely one where, you know, it was like, you know, 3 to 4 plus experience on the Sullivan scale, so not something I would necessarily want to do if I was out and about with other people, unless it was like a much smaller dose. But it was thoroughly enjoyable, and like, I didn't have any super profound revelations or anything. I as I said, I just find lack of headspace. Lack of headspace typically means less introspection in my experience, but that's okay by me. I still you know, was like, you know, watching this film Berberian Sound Studio was just like very mesmerized by it, and trying to analyze what was going on, like thinking, okay, is this like is this like I got this feeling that Toby Jones was like, and Santini the director, it was like the devil and the devil's advocate, or you know, like almost like a allegory for like the Inquisition, where where Santini is this Torquemada type character, like, you know, this high priest who has just the wicked, devious desires for these witchy women, and then Gilroy, this seemingly innocent character, who I'm almost convinced is just like a homunculus, like a homunculi or whatever. Like he was created just for the the purpose of making this film, you know, hence why his flight never existed and why his life starts to blend together with the film. But he felt kind of like a devil. He became this devil's advocate character after a while, because he's clearly disgusted by the film to begin with, you know, and having never worked on horror films, stuff like that. Because again, he says, you know, oh, I thought this was a film about horses because it has equestrian in the title. But, you know, he becomes more and more at ease with his environment, despite the fact that something's clearly toying with him, and there's something clearly not right going on in his very, very strange world. Yeah, that's, I mean, if I could offer some other film recommendations, because I mean, personally, this is just me. A lot of people disagree and go, why would you waste your time on psychedelics watching movies? Like, I love to watch fucking movies when I'm on psychedelics, particularly horror movies. You know, like, speaking of Giallo, you know, From Beyond is a great movie to watch on psychedelics. You know, if you don't mind a little bit of, you know, gore, like tarantulas ripping apart a dude's face, you know, like to you know, these very drawn out scenes, lots of eyeball torture. I don't know why that is a thing in Giallo, or like there's always eyeballs ending up impaled on something, an eyeball getting ripped out of a character. Like, there's a lot of that in From Beyond. But you know, I also like kind of the horror comedies, like the like Jim Cummins, who is a great director, auteur. You know, he acts, writes, directs, produces his own movies. Like The Wolf of Snow Hollow is, I watched it once when I accidentally did way too much 2CB to the point where I could barely see, and it was very, very enjoyable. His movie Thunder Road is a bit more of a, like, an immersive, personal kind of drama. It's a great film, though, with some really great scenes and the classic Jim Cummins kind of freak out. And then the Alpha Test, which I would say I didn't quite enjoy as much as his other movies. He did a great job of playing this Hollywood douchebag, and he funded it in a great way. Like, he went on this platform, not Kickstarter, but it was like Kickstarter, except instead of getting, you know, these gifts as a result of pledges, you actually get a share in the film. So, you know, you get return on profit on the film, which, you know, shows this is someone who's driven by the art and not the profit. And the alpha test, or the beta test, my bad. It's a story that is, like, I found it a bit confusing on the first watch, but I've watched it a couple times since then with friends, and you know, I've come to understand what's going on, and it's a big comment on Hollywood and Hollywood executives and agents, and just how it's like one of the characters in the movie describes a dying social network. You know, and it made me think, hey, there's a fuckload of jobs that just don't need to exist. It's just you're paying these guys just to book flights, like, and, you know, there's great instances of exposition in it where, like, you know, you hear you know, one of their reps kind of doing pitches to, or talking about how to pitch to various new workers, and, you know, like in one scene being like, okay, I think we need to take some time to reevaluate just what the hell we're doing here, and yeah, so it was a great critique of that, but you know, other movies I've enjoyed on Sykes would be like Jacob's Ladder. Again, not one for the faint of heart. It's one of the scariest movies I've seen personally. Not the remake. Please, just don't even look at the remake. Don't even Google it. Just watch the original. It's it's much better. Like the practical effects, the sort of Dante's Inferno style descent into this madness, this hell, and this line of from the main character's chiropractor, who's like his only saving grace as he's being sort of besieged by these demonic characters, goes, well, sometimes demons are really angels in disguise, tearing the last parts of you that are clinging onto the earth when you need to let go. And it has an ending that pissed a lot of people off, but I thought was brilliant. It's an ending that has become sort of a cliche in a lot of psychological horror movies now, just like the whole it was a dream type thing. It was a dream all along. Like, I fucking hate that. But Jacob's Ladder, as far as I know, was the first to do that type of ending. And I also got Tibetan Book of the Dead type feels from it. I wrote an essay on it a long time ago called Jacob's Ladder, or the film adaptation of the Tibetan Book of the Dead, or A Guide to Dying. It's these though, you got to keep in mind, like my taste in films are I'm someone who's not really scared by movies anymore. I found Berberian Sound Studio to be unnerving and bewildering, but not scary. I could definitely see how it would scare a lot of people, probably, especially with the amount of unknown that's implied and left up to the imagination. And it just is Toby Jones at his finest, and it makes me so much happier to have actually met the man. Shake his hand and see that he's shorter in person than I thought he already was, and he already looks like a very short person in the movies. Very, very, for such a short person, such a powerful presence in this film, and a presence that goes from very dialed down to very, very intensive as the film progresses, and just the sound effects, the score, just the visual imagery it concocts in your head, just really, it's really quite something. I also, another great horror film I'd recommend for psychedelics would be Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. After watching that, I realized that the one Rob Zombie film that I thought was okay, House of a Thousand Corpses, really just ripped off a lot of the plot from that, and also Nothing But Trouble. Just same thing, kind of crazy family, killing people and just kind of doing it and getting away with it, and doing so unabashedly. But those are my kinds of movies to watch, or psychological horror too. I also very much like psychological horror, like Jacob's Ladder or Berberian Sound Studio when I'm tripping. And then also just bad movies like I believe Species was the last one I watched, just to kind of laugh at. Also, you can't go wrong with John Carpenter ever when tripping, because he's got a distinctly surrealist style in certain films, particularly Prince of Darkness, I find, and The Fog was also a good one to watch on 4-ACO DMT. Yeah, I mean, that's gonna wrap it up with my latest experiment. Oh boy, I'd say yeah, recommend it, but it is just, fair warning, it is a very intense combination. If you're not used to stuff like DMT, because I just, people call it synthetic shrooms, and I know shrooms are 4-HO DMT, but like I still find them, unless you take a heroic dose, like I find them very, very different than DMT. Not entirely so. There's similarities in the geometry, I find. Like there's typically a tribal Native American sort of feeling to it, indigenous, whatever, sort of feel to it. But I find 4-ACO DMT is more like DMT visuals, but unless you do a ton of it, obviously, and break through, like it's the visuals are, just as I find they're more crisp than something like mushrooms, more visible, more interactive. Maybe that's just because my head's a bit clearer, but the visuals to me feel more DMT in nature, like NN-DMT in nature, than psilocybin mushrooms. Yeah, that wraps up my latest experiment, and also, my review of Berberian Sound Studio, and also other films I'd recommend, like just Giallo horror in general. If you're into that kind of thing, it's not for everyone. It's very violent. It's usually full of, a lot of sexuality or sexually explicit scenes, stuff like that. It's exploitation horror. It's the stuff that, probably makes Eli Roth get a fucking raging hard on. I think that's why he remade Green Inferno, which was a terrible remake, by the way. I've never seen the original because I saw Cannibal Holocaust and I was like, okay, I think I've got the idea of what they're going for here. I don't need to see any more of this, thank you very much. But I remember watching Green Inferno once, just one night. I wasn't able to sleep, and it was on Netflix, and God, it was just, I don't see why Eli Roth is like, the only thing he's done that I've ever actually enjoyed was just that one trailer, fake trailer for Thanksgiving in the Grindhouse movies. I think that and the Don't Edgar Wright, Simon Pegg fake trailer, those were both the two standout ones in the Grindhouse films that Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez did, which, also those are particularly Planet Terror are good ones to watch on Sykes, that's for sure. Another good one is John Carpenter and Toby Hooper's Body Bags, and then the remake of The Blob, which I did not know this, but what's his name, Frank, the guy who did The Mist and Shawshank Redemption, all those amazing, like really good Stephen King adaptations. He actually worked on the screenplay for it, and it's one of the better remakes I've seen, and I'd say its practical effects are like up there with The Thing, especially in terms of the brutality. Natural Born Killers, that's another good one, especially because of the psychedelic and just overtone of the whole film. Anyways, I'm gonna wrap it up there. Subscribe, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you later.